In this video, I'm talking about special word, do, and its third person form, does, and the past form, did. Now, this is a word that is confusing for some people when they're learning English because the way we use it and the concept is something new for a lot of people coming into this language. And even for some of my students at the advanced level, this word is still a little confusing. So let's look at why we use this word and when it can be confusing. One thing is that the word do does have a normal definition by itself. And if you speak Spanish, you would probably translate it into Spanish as the verb hacer. But hacer, coming back into English, could be do or make. Two different verbs in English, do or make. But we have this idea of do, with that word, that Spanish word hacer, being some action, something that you're creating or some movement there. Okay, some action to do. However, we also use the word do as a helper verb, and that's what we're looking at today. When do is a helper verb. Again, do has a separate purpose in English, a definition like to do your homework, to do an action, okay? To do the dishes, to do the laundry. But in this part of our grammar, we're looking at do as a helper verb. And why do we need this helper verb? Usually we need it to make questions or to make negative sentences or negative questions. But the emphasis here is that it's any kind of question or a negative sentence. Questions or negative sentence. And again, it could be a negative question or a positive question. It also could be a positive question. But we need this word do or did because of a rule we have in English, a two-verb rule. Now, this part may exist in your language. It does exist in many, many, many languages. There's a two-verb rule. For example, in Spanish, this two-verb rule is very similar. The two-verb rule says that the first verb, if two verbs are working together, the first verb will get the conjugations. It will show time, like the past, the present. It will show the time. It will show conjugations. The second verb will be the infinitive, also known as the base form. This is like the dictionary form of the verb. When you look up the word in the dictionary, what does it look like? That infinitive or base form of the verb. For example, for the verb walk. Walks is a conjugation. It's a third person. Walked is the past. That's time. The infinitive form would just be to walk. The base form, walk or to walk. If we have two verbs that are working together, the first verb will get the conjugations and will show time, okay? The second verb will not. Now, this rule again exists in many languages. For example, in Spanish, I could say como, and I have my conjugations. Como, comes, comemos. Or in the past, comí, comiste. Or I could have many conjugations, many different ways that I could conjugate that verb, comer. But if I add a verb before that, that's working with it, for example, necesitar. Necesito comer. the verb returns to its infinitive base form, comer, not necesito como or necesitas comes. No way. Necesitas comer. Necesito comer. Necesitamos comer. Necesitan comer. In English as well, if I have a verb here, like I need, I would show any changes here. I need to eat, infinitive form, to eat. You need to eat. Third person, she needs. There's the conjugation. She needs to eat. Or if we're showing the time, the past, I needed to eat. In all of those examples, the verb eat is in that infinitive form, to eat, that base form, to eat. Okay, now, this rule right here is important when we're thinking about using do, does, and did as our helper verb, because we have another rule in English. For a normal sentence, most verbs cannot be questions or negative for direct questions. And I also have a video about direct questions you can look at to understand what that is. But for right now, just think about most of the questions you have learned in English. Most verbs cannot be a question by themselves, and specifically thinking of direct questions. Most verbs cannot be a question by themselves, because for us to create a question, specifically direct questions, in English we have a rule where we put the first verb, or if there's only one verb in the sentence, whichever verb that is, the first verb before the subject to create a direct question. And maybe you will have another verb. Maybe you will have 3 verbs. This is optional. Maybe you will have some additional information over here. Maybe you will have a question word over here. You could have a question word like who, what, where, when, how, why. But this is the core structure for a direct question, having a verb before a subject. If someone starts a sentence, or is speaking to me and starts a sentence with a verb before a subject, I instantly know they're asking me a question. Are you? I know that's a question. Did you? I know it's a question. The verb is coming before the subject. How are you? Where is he? Where is the bank? Why is this? Blah, 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 blah. Okay? There's some verb before subject. However, as I mentioned, not every verb in English can be a direct question, because not every verb can go before the subject. We have a list of auxiliary verbs, modal verbs, helper verbs, like should, will, can, have, if it's the have for what we call present perfect, so that could work, sometimes not, depending on what you mean with the verb have. But there is a list of verbs that can, but it's a short list. There's a short list of verbs that can go before the subject, and if you're interested in those, they're called auxiliary verbs, modal verbs, or again, helper verbs. Do is our popular helper verb to help other verbs that cannot be questions. For example, walk, talk, run, eat. Those verbs are not direct question verbs. So we use the word do, or does, or did to create that question. Do, if the subject is I, you, we, or they. Does if the subject is he, she, or it. And did if your question is in the past. Did you, did she, did we, did they. The verb here will be the action you really want to know about. Do you swim? Does she like soccer? Did you study English? Where did you study English? When did you study English? Okay. So we would use the word do or does or did. Did for the past, does for he, she, or it, and do for everything else to help out this verb that you really want to know about. And the same is true for making a sentence negative. However, this part will look different. If you're just making a normal negative sentence, then we would still have the subject first, as we do with other sentences in English. And then your verb, and more specifically helper verb, and then everything else. So we could say something like, she doesn't eat chocolate. They don't go to the movies. We have our helper verb here. They didn't break the window. She didn't see the accident. We have our subject, helper verb, and the action you're really talking about. But the helper verb here would be in the negative form. Don't, doesn't, or didn't to make a negative sentence. And if you want to make a question, we would just move this here again with that form. Don't you? Doesn't she? Or didn't they? Those are some other options. Okay? If you want to split up the contraction of don't to do not, or doesn't to does not, or didn't to did not, then we would have that verb here, did, the subject, and not would be in this area. Did you not? Does she not? Okay. Well, that's a basic overview of do, does, and did as a helper verb. Hopefully it's a little clearer for you now how and when and why to use this strange verb in English.